Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Phil from the Checkerboard Kids program, and right now, my guest, the one and only Adam Reeves.
I co-wrote a book called Alpha Boys School, Cradle of Jamaican Music, which I wrote with Heather Augustine, who is
And she's written a couple of books in her time.
She's written a lot of books on ska and Jamaican music. I would describe her as a heavyweight, and she's a serious historian and researcher. Heather had written the Don Drummond book only like a couple of years before, and that was for me a massive, landmark, because I'd been mystified by Don Drummond for years.
Right.
Trombonist with the Skatalites. So I
he
just
also trained, helped teach Rico when he was in school.
He mentored Rico. Yeah, Alpha Boys School has a kind of mentoring program where they call it Each One Teach One, where you get kind of given a mentor who's maybe a couple of years further down the line than you. And Rico being one of the all-time great, ska renegade trombone players.
Undisputed.
So a lot of people, what they don't necessarily know about Don Drummond, because he's known as a 60s ska player, was that he actually made a big splash in Kingston in the 50s, in the early 50s, as a young man, aged about like 20. He had a band called the Don Drummond Four. And yeah, he was, well, unfortunately, there's no recordings.
I was going to say,
there was no studios in Jamaica back then. There wasn't a studio. So, but, he played for Dave Brubeck. He played for Sarah Vaughan when she came to Jamaica, and she ranked him as one of the best trombonists in the world.
Wow.
So he knew that he was great. He knew he was of a high caliber, but he was held back and frustrated by just being in a small island and not being able to showcase himself anywhere else, unfortunately.
Right.
And he was dogged by some quite severe mental health issues.
Can we touch on that here? Because these are some of the things that you're going to be bringing up in the book Trombone Man, right?
Well, it's a comic book, actually.
I'm a big comic fan, graphic novels. I really dig that big time. So it's just like the definitive book, I feel came out, right? Like the Heather Augustine book.
Heather's book is a definitive book.
Because this is the comic version of it. It will reach a whole new generation.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about Heather's book is that it's really for the diehard fans. It's one for the fans for sure. And she did a great job. She did, for me, like I got into Don Drummond in the 1980s as a teenager, and there was nothing about him, literally nothing. There was no internet for a start. So all we knew was that he'd gone mad and murdered someone who was his lover, and that she'd made this record, and I'd heard that somebody actually had that single in London at the time. So I'd heard the record. I knew that much. There was nothing else, literally nothing. And there was literally nothing until Heather wrote that book. I mean, you might sort of hear a story or something, but you didn't know what to go on. I literally saw nothing written down until 2013 when her book came out. I wanted to make the story accessible, and I'd never written a comic before. And having done the Alpha Boys book, I kind of realized I didn't really want to do more sort of academic type books. Or I wouldn't say it's an academic book, but it's quite chewy, But I've read a lot of graphic novels, and I've noticed that there's a lot of music biography. And my library's got some great graphic novels, and I've read some really quite
Any favorites?
stuff. Favorites. There's a Johnny Cash one that's great. There's a Nick Cave biography I highly recommend. I like that kind of thing. And there's a Bowie one. There's a couple of Bob Marley ones which are kind of okay. I wanted to do something on a higher caliber than those.
And so that's what you're going for here.
Well, yeah. And the artist that I'm working with is Cypriot, Costantinos Pissourios. Cos, we call him. And he specializes in sound system culture as an illustrator.
Right.
That's what he does. I
see. That's his jam. I saw some of his artwork on there.
Yeah. He's just immersed in reggae and sound system culture. He's got a sound system. He's so immersed in the universe that we're trying to create. As soon as he came on board, which was about a year ago, it was like lighting a fire under the project. It was like, yes, you know, this is
Right. I mean, this
and if you
artwork
watch
is
our
fantastic.
he lives in an eco pod sort of dome house in a forest in
Whoa.
Cyprus. Not quite off grid, but you know, he lives quite remote.
So he could really concentrate and work on his stuff.
He can work on his stuff. He can hold sound system events on his land, which is what we did when we went out there. We put on
Wow.
a party, stayed with him for 3 weeks. We, you know, we really connected properly. You know, like, we're going to do this. We need to spend time together, and we, you know, we've got a great connection. And he totally understands. You know, I feel like I could say to him, "Can you do this?" And I just know that he's going to do it better than I expected. You just know with Cos that it's going to be like, you want this, he's going to give you this.
Right on. To be able to do this, you need resources to be able to pull this thing off, right? And you got a Kickstarter going on here, and it's kind of
comics are expensive.
Yeah, and it's an all or nothing sort of situation here. You know.
Yeah.
So you have 32 days from this moment, right? You need to raise.
It's a lot of money. Comics are really labor intensive.
It's 15,000 over here in American dollars. I'm looking at
exactly. Like, we're talking about a lot. It's like making a comic is like making a movie. You know, people don't necessarily realize that there's a lot that goes into it. You know, you have comic studios. You have you would have like a production line with a script writer, a penciler, an inker, a colorist, a letterer, you know, page layout. You have a whole production line team just churning out comics. We're not doing it that way, but it is a lot of work, and I'm working
labor intensive here.
Very labor intensive. I'm also working with a script advisor because I hadn't done a comic before myself. So I brought on a script advisor, a guy called Nicholas De Silva, who's got a comic called Dread and Alive.
Oh, right. I saw some of that going on there too.
Yeah, it's a Jamaican themed horror comic, kind of supernatural.
Some duppies going on in there.
Yeah, it's full of ghosts, full of, you know, nature spirits.
I bet.
Part of it's set in the time of the Maroons, you know, the ancient, the people, the freed slaves who held back the British in the cockpit country in Jamaica, and part of it's set in the future. So it's very interesting. Anyway, I'm
going to have to, as a comic fan, I'm definitely going to check out some of this too, and I want to be able to check out this. So there's different things that people can get if they donate certain amounts here. Now,
yeah, we've got a ton of merch on there. So
now my question is here. I'm here in America, so I see if you do it via Kickstarter here, I'll put the link there. It translates to dollars, and we could do that, and we'll be able to get copies of this and digital copies of the comic when it comes out as things come out, right?
They'll be able to get a physical hard copy.
Yes, I like a physical hard copy.
Yeah, yes, they'll be digital, but no, this is a physical print copy.
Yeah, believe me, I always feel that comics is this is the old rude tales comic book thing. So it's just like physical comics. It's just a great thing to behold. I mean, I'm a big collector of records and a collector of comics, and it's just like I just love that physical medium.
Yeah. I mean, the people who are into reggae and ska, they're collectors, and it's in their DNA. So, you know, digital comics, great, you know, read it on your phone and whatnot, but you know, you want to hold something.
Exactly.
You want to you know, get ink on your fingers.
Yep.
You want to be able to smell it.
Smell it. Yes. You are. So you know what's up. You know what's up. Let's talk about Don Drummond, the man. Now,
yes,
he was suffering from. I think he was misdiagnosed. What do you think that he had going on there?
Well, I don't think he was really diagnosed at all. I'm not sure. I mean, from as far as Heather Augustine's book and from what my many conversations with her is that it seems that he just found himself in this quite sort of austere and old-fashioned, like almost like a Victorian mental asylum, and I just don't think he got the treatment, you know, it was that he should have got. I mean, they put him on loads of meds, which is obviously that's the right thing to do when somebody's schizophrenic or
they're just trying to keep
they didn't know
docile.
what. I think it was a bit haphazard from what I understand. Yeah, and it didn't work.
Right. And then now there was a lot of things concerning his death when they said he passed away. This was in 69. They said he died of natural causes, but there are some people that had different takes on that.
There's a whole load of speculation about what happened to Don Drummond. So he died in his cell in 1969. He was imprisoned on New Year's Day 1965, which was the day he murdered his lover,
Right.
Margarita.
A person that he really cared for. So if you think like I guess other people could think like a Sid and Nancy sort of thing. But
so many people have compared it to Sid and Nancy. Yeah, it's a kind of Sid and Nancy type story. Yeah. And yeah, he cared for her. She cared very much for him. She had a whole massive tragic backstory. And one of the things that I'm wanting to do with the comic is really place Margarita center stage, because she's a very interesting and quite tragic, but very powerful and likable personality.
Right. And then people loved them as a couple.
Yeah, yeah, they were kind of like the groovy couple of Kingston in the early 60s. You know, they were
The power
always,
couple.
I think so. I mean, they were definitely like a thing, and everyone knew they were together.
What about the people that were thinking that his death might have been like the mob retaliating about her? Is there ties there? What's up with that?
Okay, so Margarita's surname is Mahfoud. Her real name is Anita Mahfoud, and her family, the Mahfouds, they're Syrian Jamaican. People might not know, but there's a lot of Syrians and Lebanese in Jamaica, as there are Chinese and Indians.
Right.
And so she came from a Syrian family, business family, and the Mahfouds now are one of the biggest business families in Jamaica, with soft drinks and all kinds of other stuff. So they're a very big, powerful family, and they were even then in the 60s. And there was speculation for sure that they sent somebody in to do Don Drummond in. Right. The story is that at his funeral, somebody came in with a death certificate, which the mental hospital had issued, and ripped it up in front of everyone, and a riot nearly broke out, and they had to cancel the funeral. But it's also speculated that that wasn't the death certificate at all. It was just a bit of paper.
Right, right. Anybody could have said anything. It's a time before internet, a time before any of this stuff. So.
Yeah. So anyway, Heather really digs deep into this story, and as to whether he was murdered or not, and she comes up with the conclusion that he was not. She says she never found any conclusive evidence that that was the case.
Right.
But you know, once a fire has been stoked, it's often hard to put it out.
Right.
So if people decide that, you know how things are. If people
of course. Yeah, please. I'm in America. Anything could be taken out of context and blown out of proportion. So
I named my publishing entity for this comic and any future comics that I create Hearsay Media, because Chris Blackwell from Island Records, he once said, "There are no facts about Jamaica." You know, it's like a sort of almost there's a mysterious, intangible kind of natural mystic flowing through Jamaica. You can't quite put your finger on. And I mean, I've heard people say things about Don Drummond, and then I've heard other people say completely different things about Don Drummond. You mentioned Floyd Lloyd Severai.
Right.
Okay. He told me when I was hanging out with him in Jamaica, and I thought he was great, by the way. I really like Floyd. One of the great people, great musicians, great person. But he told me that Don murdered Margarita in the club on New Year's Eve in front of everyone. That it was a public execution. But because at that time, it was before Heather wrote her book, and I hadn't, you know, there was still nothing written down. I thought, well, this is the first person I've met who actually knows anything. So for a little while, I was going around thinking, wow, he did it in public. And then I read the book and like, no, that's not
hearsay. More hearsay.
But, you know, it's hearsay, and there's a lot of hearsay. So I called my company Hearsay Media, and also it's a sort of get out of jail free card. It's like a caveat, because I know that people are going to come after me and say, that didn't happen like that, and that didn't happen like that, you know.
But you welcome that. You want to get more facts in. You want to hear more information, and you want more stuff to come. You know what? But they say as long as people are talking about it, that's the thing. It'll generate a lot of buzz and bring a lot of people to a lot of things. And ultimately, to go back and listen to the music of Don Drummond and
Very
get back
true.
to that
Very
stuff.
true. That's the thing, is to get people to listen to the music.
Well, that sounds like something I'm down for. So I'm definitely gonna drop some bucks on this thing and check this out
Oh
because
man,
A,
thank
I
you
love
so much.
comics, and B, I love this, and I want to hear more about this. And now note, you're calling him SKA'S Fallen Genius. Now, to be people throw out the word genius, like, some people's like, hey, that Kanye is a genius, whatever. All right, the main
Yeah.
point is, but you cannot deny he like, to talk about Kanye for a second, that he has done stuff that was innovative in the studios, things like this. So now bringing it back to Don Drummond, Prince, also another genius. People
Mm,
cannot deny Prince
mm,
has done so much. But so now to talk about Don Drummond in his time,
mm.
tell me about his genius. Go ahead.
Don Drummond was in that category.
Mm-hmm.
So he was beyond just a very creative, talented musician. He was recognized as something special at a young age at Alpha Boys School. And other musicians, like band leaders in Jamaica, there were some very accomplished big band leaders who saw something in him that they were in awe of. They recognized it. And there was some quite eccentric stuff, which is, he was, the thing about genius is we know they're kind of wired differently.
Right.
They're
They think
probably
he's not
somewhere on the
on the
spectrum,
spectrum of autism.
totally, that, goes hand in hand. The eccentric or
Yeah.
mad
Yeah,
genius.
they were always saying that about Prince too. As a young kid, they knew he was
Yeah,
could play all these different instruments. They knew something was up with this kid. Not much for
They're
talking to
just
people, but
different brain chemistry or different wiring,
mm-hmm.
whatever. So there's a story about one of the band leaders of Kingston was watching Don Drummond play, and he noticed that he's got the musical score, and he's playing along with the band, totally perfectly in time and everything, and the score is upside down.
So he's
He's
not.
reading the musical score upside down and playing it. Like
Wow.
that is incredibly difficult thing to
Do
do.
you think he could have been dyslexic a little bit or something like that going on?
Who knows? I don't know.
You know what?
Maybe.
More stuff that is undiagnosed, and then all hearsay because we couldn't. They just didn't have the things.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of what his problems were exacerbated by the amount of ganja he was smoking as well. So ganja and psychosis can be, if you've got a tendency for psychosis, strong Jamaican weed is, probably not the best thing to be putting in your system. So yeah, he was a big smoker, and we know that can
Well,
be
what they always talk
great
about,
for
stuff
if
like
you're a
that.
musician, but
Right, they always say stuff like that. It was a form of self-medication, right? People
yeah, I guess
if
so.
people have a thing going on there, they medicate themselves with whatever is around because they do not have a diagnosis.
And apparently, the head of Bellevue Mental Asylum was a great believer in it, and actually plied Don with ganja when he was actually in there. That he'd grown himself.
Wow.
Yeah, in the hospital.
Amazing.
And then, but apparently years later, the same doctor kind of reneged on his position and said, actually, I don't think it's that good for you.
Well, some arm twisting might have gone on over there. You don't know who could have been influenced.
Yeah, but if he's in a cell and he's been given weed, probably eased his pain.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to reading this, finding out more about him.
Yeah, so we're going back to his childhood on the streets of Kingston in the late 1930s, early 40s, getting into trouble with the police and being a bit of he wasn't going to school, and they used to round up kids who were causing trouble in the neighborhood if they weren't going to school, and they'd give you a warning. They give the parents a warning, and if they kind of didn't comply and they didn't get on the straight and narrow path, they'd basically put them into Alpha Boys School.
Wow, and they didn't know what they were getting put into. They got put into
no. So he got taken away from his mum, and aged about, I think, 9 or 10. And in the book, that's a very dramatic child, being taken away from your mother, being placed by the police and the social services into the school at a really young age with all these other kids and loads of really strict Roman Catholic nuns. I mean, that's a big deal for anyone, to go through that at that age.
Right,
So
it's like traumatic.
That's a moment in the story for sure. And then but he finds his path, and this is what I think is amazing about the story is it's a story of somebody who, against all odds, found his creativity and then fought to get it heard. He found the talent, and then he had to fight to get his talent actually heard.
Right.
And then he was exploited.
Yeah, it's
and that exacerbated his already sort of fragile consciousness. So there's a lot going on there.
It's also, like I said, a lesson for those that are interested in music and the music of today's, so that musicians now don't get exploited.
Yeah. I mean, Jamaica was tragically, there's still the reverberations of the lack of infrastructure in the 60s and 70s is still kind of echoing down the generations to people, people in their old age or their children. There's children of great stars who are,
right.
Records that sold a lot, and they never saw a beam from it. They never saw anything. And that's just the story of reggae, really, which is a real shame. And Don, was around for all of that. He was like, the studio bosses made you feel like you were a hired hand.
It's crazy. Yeah, stuff like that in America too. You could look straight across the early days of music.
Yeah.
So here's hoping that the future is better. All right, we've touched upon these things. I want people to, all right, you know what? I will speak for myself. This is something that I'm definitely going to be backing. I'm just throwing it out there.
Thank you so much.
I want other people to check this thing out. So I want to put links for it, Trombone Man, and hopefully we will be seeing these things coming to us. But I know no matter what happens, this thing has got to come out. And you never know. When these things happen and people see these things and people see graphic novels about these things, you know what? Sometimes networks like Netflix or Amazon, they say, hey, oh, yeah, look at Amazon. Hey, you saw Small Axe?
Exactly.
Yeah. You see that?
Small Axe. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. They see something like that and they're like, hey, you know what? We can make a thing of this comic over here. Just throwing it out there.
I want people watching this to go and pre-order the comic on the crowdfund and whatever other merch you can find on there that you like. There's little bundles we put together.
Right.
And then when it comes out, and eventually it's going to be a graphic novel in like a couple of years' time when we're done, you can say to your friends, you helped to make this thing happen. And there aren't comics about ska and Jamaican music. There aren't. What we're doing here is groundbreaking. And I'm wanting to do more of them in the future. I've got a lot of ideas for more stuff to do with reggae and ska, and then other music forms as well.
And this is the way that the histories get out there, because like before, these things were not written. I was like,
it's a perfect platform to tell these stories. And if I can get the first one done, the first one is always going to be the hardest. So
the first cut is the deepest on this thing. Just
exactly. So I'd love it if your viewers could give some energy to it. And I want to say one thing as well, is that you can back this project for £1, which at the moment on our currently plunged pound, which is really doing badly, it's about $1.13. And what that does, as well as helping, obviously, every penny counts, every cent counts, but what it also does, if enough people just put in £1, Kickstarter's algorithms kind of get a little tickle.
All right.
And it wakes up Kickstarter, and Kickstarter goes, oh, this person is putting a lot of effort in and getting people to come over. We'll reward them, and we'll plaster their comic or their project all over Kickstarter, and it'll show up in people's feeds. So if you can put in just $1 or £1, it actually.
So we're really in for a penny, in for a pound over here. That's what they.
Exactly. We say that too. Yeah.
Oh no, you guys say it. I'm just nicking it, putting it there.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you
so
much.
You know your English isms.
Well, hey, gee, I've been definitely watching a lot and listening to a lot, and all my life, so it's all good. So please, let's give it up for Adam Reeves and this amazing thing is Trombone Man, Ska's Fallen Genius. I'm gonna put the links in there so people can check it out, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Phil, for having me on. Much appreciated.
Right on, right on.